The greatest story ever told did not begin with once upon a time. It began with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Welcome back again to the library, Readers and Rapscallions. Ian is here, and today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite series, properties, stories, period, of all time, and that's going to be Star Wars. Star Wars is a fictional universe I have spent so much time in, perhaps more time than any other. I feel like seeing Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia on the screen or in the pages of a book, it's like seeing old friends. I've recently, over the past couple of years, decided to pick up the stories from the Star Wars Expanded Universe, or EU, and work my way through those basically for the first time. It's at the point where what I know about Star Wars is basically encyclopedic. I read something like, I think it was 48 or 50 total books from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. So what is the EU? Well, it started all the way back in 1978 with Splendor of the Mind's Eye, which was kind of like a sequel novelization to the original Star Wars movie. That was back when they thought they were only going to make one, so it's completely different than anything you would see in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi or anything like that. I haven't actually read it. I might someday, but the EU really took off in 1991 with the Thrawn trilogy. This brought everything right on back and sparked it must have been the better part of 15 years of, maybe even longer, of new stories during, before, and after the main trilogy, and then later on the prequel trilogy. So now we're talking about the EU. Let's talk about why you should read it. Guys, there is so much more in the Star Wars universe that you can get to by reading the Expanded Universe. It goes all the way to 25,000 years before the films take place, and then I think it goes something like 40 or 45 years after Return of the Jedi. That is just printed books. That's not counting video games. That's not counting graphic novels. That's not counting any of that. So to kind of break this down a little bit, let's just divide it up into eras. First off is the Old Republic era. So this goes as far back as you can go. If you're familiar with Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, that's what this is. You also have, I think it's called Dawn of the Force or Dawn of the Jedi. I haven't read it, but it's like the earliest of the Star Wars properties that are out there. And it goes to like 25,000 years before Phantom Menace, even before any of the films. It's like the beginning of the Republic. But the big standout hit of this era is going to be the Darth Bane trilogy. So with the Sith, there's the rule of two: one master to embody power, one apprentice to crave it. And the Darth Bane trilogy tells you how that happened. There were once many more Sith. Now there are only two. There was a great war with the Jedi. Darth Bane began the rule of two and confined the Sith into the shadows and basically lurked as background characters, biding their time. And this is 1,000 years before Phantom Menace takes place. So it's a trilogy. It's Drew Karshipshin, I believe, is the name of the author, and it's just awesome. You get some crazy displays of force power in this, and you see the origins of the Sith. If we're gonna move a little bit forward in time, still in the Old Republic era, right up around 32 years before the Battle of Yavin. This is the timeline of Phantom Menace, and that's Darth Plagueis. This is another insight into the inner workings of the Sith. Darth Plagueis, the Wise, and this is Darth Sidious's master. So you see Darth Sidious as a young man on Naboo, and you see a lot of where he gets his operating ideas from. Darth Plagueis also being a prominent character within the galaxy, but also hiding in plain sight. This way he has the resources and influence to achieve his ends, but he's also hidden and is just sort of lurking in the shadows and kind of biding his time. And this is kind of his quest for immortality, his manipulations behind the scenes, and it leaves off overlapping with the events of Phantom Menace. So it really puts that movie into a new context. And once you watch Phantom Menace after reading this book, you see the movie in an entirely new light, and it's awesome. All right, going forward into the Clone Wars era, the one big standout from here is actually the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Now, if you're anything like me, and you see novelization, you're kind of like, ugh. But I promise you that if you don't read any other books on this list, read the Revenge of the Sith novelization. It puts that whole movie into an entire new context. You get extra insight into the characters' motivations. Anakin's struggle with the dark side is so much more drawn out and nuanced, and it just tells the story in a way that you really can't in a film, just by the nature of both of those media. It transforms our heroes into basically myths, because you get a lot of perspective from people on the ground in the Clone Wars just trying to live their lives, and there's this great epic scale war happening, and how regular people view characters like Obi-Wan and Anakin. The betrayal in Revenge of the Sith hits so much more in the story, and then rewatching, again, just like with Darth Plagueis, rewatching the movie after reading this entirely recontextualizes everything, and you really get the feeling that if time and medium wasn't a constraint, that this is the kind of movie they would have made with Revenge of the Sith. Stepping into the Rebellion era, we have Shadows of the Empire. Now, this isn't everyone's favorite. I liked it because it's a fun stopover between the events of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I love that for the simple reason that you get more Darth Vader. So Darth Vader obviously features very, very prominently in this. He's just amazing. This whole story basically centers around Luke and Leia kind of laying the groundwork for Han's rescue mission. They meet Dash Rendar, who's a sort of Han Solo-like character. You have another character, Prince Shizor, who's a crime lord, and he is kind of competing with Darth Vader for being Palpatine's favorite, so to speak. I mean, it's Darth Vader, so good luck. But honestly, just having more Vader in there is worth the read. Again, this isn't a lot of people's favorite. I liked it basically just for the time period, and it gives you a little bit more context. And it also helps you explain why at the end of Empire, Luke was at his lowest. He really didn't have a whole lot of training, clearly wasn't ready. But then he's Jedi Ninja Assassin at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. This kind of helps explain what happened to bridge the gap between those two time periods. So if you're interested in that at all, check it out. All right, now we're transitioning into my favorite, the New Republic era. So if we're going chronologically, this would start with X-Wing, which is 4 books, and then another, I think, 3-book series. So you have just X-Wing, and then you have Wraith Squadron. This is peak military science fiction. So the X-Wing series is I think it's about 2 years after the Battle of Endor, and this is the story of how the Rebellion, now the New Republic, basically took Coruscant. And there's so much more to it than that. Wedge Antilles is a main character. You get introduction to Corran Horn, who's a fan favorite in the EU. There's a little bit of Luke Skywalker, but not a whole lot, and that's kind of what makes it special. With a couple of exceptions, there's not a whole lot of Jedi stuff in it. So you get, it kind of reads like I felt like Top Gun or like Stargate, where you get just that military element to it. It's fighter pilots conducting missions, and then Wraith Squadron is some of the most fun that the EU ever is, because they're not only pilots, but they're also commandos, and you get the dynamic between all these characters kind of in a team. And it's just fun, like especially Ray Squadron is like the funniest dialogue that you're going to get in the Star Wars EU. And I mean, understanding the greater story, the X-Wing books, you don't have to read them, but they're really, really good and they're worth your time. And you don't need a whole lot of background information to understand what's going on. You just need to watch Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi, and you're good to go. But they're not necessarily the main story of Star Wars. Speaking of the main story, we have the Thrawn trilogy. This is kind of where the EU all took off. So these were written before X-Wing, but they take place about 5 years after the end of Return of the Jedi. They introduce Grand Admiral Thrawn, a character who, even before he was reintroduced by Disney onto the screen, he was a character that Star Wars fans just adored. I honestly spent a lot of time wondering who this big blue guy was until I actually learned, oh, he is like the most terrifying villain since Vader. And I actually, figured out who he was. He's very, very cerebral. He's like a chess master, and he's absolutely terrifying he's 5, 10, 15, 300 steps ahead of our heroes the entire time. And this is really where the EU kind of takes off. You introduced to Mara Jade, another beloved character in the EU. You get the introduction of Jason and Jaina Solo, the children of Han and Leia. And you do get a little bit of awkwardness with the explanation of certain events in the stories, because remember, these were written before Phantom Menace. We didn't know how the Jedi worked in the old times, and we didn't know what the Clone Wars were. We didn't know how the Republic worked. So author Timothy Zahn had to kind of make his best guesses with that. Oh, speaking of the prequels, this is where Coruscant comes from. It was not first used in Phantom Menace. Timothy Zahn invented the name Coruscant for the Imperial capital for these books, and that's kind of cool. And it's absolutely wonderful. If you want to check out any of these books, this is a great place to start. You should at least read the Thrawn trilogy and then kind of decide where you want to go from there, because this is some of the best that the EU has to offer. I love this series. It really does feel like a perfect follow-up to Return of the Jedi. This feels like episode 7, 8, 9, and that you could make a case in your head that this is the way it happened. And I absolutely love this series. After the Thrawn trilogy, you have the Jedi Academy trilogy. This is Luke Skywalker kind of coming into his own, realizing he's Grand Master of the Order and kind of figuring out how this all works. And he opens up an academy for Jedi on Yavin 4. It's kind of him trying to find new Jedi for the Jedi Order, as the name suggests, Jedi Academy. You have skirmishes with remnants of the Empire. You have an ancient ghost of evil, so that's awesome. And unfortunately, you do get a little bit of cracks in the story showing, because it's worth your time. It's a fun read. I also feel like it could have been 2 books, and there's a little bit of filler in there with the stuff on Castle and the stuff with the Sun Crusher. People who've read it will know. I kind of feel like that wasn't particularly necessary. But on the other hand, you do get Kip Durin, who's, again, another beloved EU character, just awesome. And you get his struggles with, figuring out. He's kind of like Luke. He's an immensely powerful conduit of the Force, and he needs to kind of figure out exactly what that means, and he doesn't have a great time with it. More Mara Jade is always awesome. And the skirmishes that you have with the Imperial remnants are just great. And it's not quite as strong of an entry as the Thrawn trilogy, but it is still worth your time. I'd say read the Thrawn trilogy first, kind of see how you feel, maybe give these a go afterwards. After Jedi Academy trilogy, you have all other different kinds of adventures. You've got the Calista trilogy, which isn't the best, but is worth going through just so you can understand what's happening in Darksaber, because Darksaber is probably the singular most pleasant surprise I had reading the EU. Darksaber is You got a story about super weapons, but this one works differently than you might have expected, and turns out differently than you might have expected. You have a heroic sacrifice by a named character from the original trilogy actually dies. I'm not going to say who it is, but there's a heroic sacrifice, and a member of the Imperial Remnant has like such an awesome red wedding scene that it's just amazing, and I'm kind of surprised more people don't talk about how just boss it was. What happened with that, or like Al Capone eliminating the competition type of thing. It was just awesome. After that, you've got the Black Fleet crisis. So the Republic comes into contact with the Aviatha, who are a race of aliens from the far edge of the galaxy that have a lot of firepower and aren't very nice. The series does suffer a little bit from making narrative decisions that would later be contradicted by the prequel movies. So what I do when I come across that in any of these books is I just kind of turn off my brain during that part and just kind of like work around that and just sort of mentally substitute certain things in so that fits better with the movies, because at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about. It's all about having fun, and that's what I do, and that's why I love Star Wars so much, is because it's just fun. It's just fun, and you get to have a good time with it no matter what. And you have all the kinds of books kind of sprinkled in, and unfortunately throughout that journey you have the occasional dud or two. There's the Carillion trilogy, which I wasn't a super big fan of, but you do get a lot of good information about and experiences with the Solo kids, because they're kind of growing up at this point. But then after all that, you have the Hand of Thrawn duology. So with these books, basically everything from Thrawn trilogy through Hand of Thrawn, people will call that the Bantam era because Bantam was a publisher, and then after these they go to a different publisher. This closes out the Bantam era, and Timothy Zahn comes back to basically write more Thrawn and give us a send-off to this chapter of Star Wars. Luke and Mara Jade have their relationship go to a new level. You get the return of an old enemy. We're on the eve of an armistice between the what's left of the Empire and the New Republic, and you've got basically like spy thriller type narrative elements. You have that same chess master, grand strategist type thinking that you got in the Thrawn trilogy. There's terror attacks. It's actually really high intensity stuff, and it kind of feels more real than a lot of the other Star Wars does. And they set the stage for what's to come in a great way if you're paying attention, and it's just great stuff, and I was a big fan of these books. After the Thrawn duology, you've got the New Jedi Order. I can't even fit them all on here. This isn't even all of them. I've got some of the hard covers down there that aren't even going to fit. I just need to make sure I don't drop them. But yeah, so the New Jedi Order is one of my favorites because it was a new direction for Star Wars. They go to Del Rey as a publisher, and basically what happened was, behind the scenes, you have Del Rey working with Lucasfilm and 10 or so different authors, because it's 19 books. It's a 19-book series. And they're basically spending, probably must have been a year or so, road mapping this whole series. And it was kind of like the MCU before the MCU. It's really amazing. So they had narrative beats that they needed to get into the series. You had to start here and end here. And book one started here and ended here, and it had to have these narrative points. Book two, start here and end here, and it had to have these narrative points. Rinse, wash, repeat. It has this flowing narrative scaffold in place, and each book has its own flavor because they were written by different authors. So the New Jedi Order were like 20 years after the Battle of Yavin. The Solo kids are, 19 or so. And our main heroes from the original movies are kind of just past their prime. When we get invaders from the outside, from another galaxy, these are the Yuuzhan Vong. They're zealots that view machines as heretical. So they're violent and warlike. They rely on biotechnology, and most importantly, they can't be detected within the Force. So the Jedi are significantly depowered when facing these guys, which is such a brilliant narrative decision because the Jedi were kind of broken in terms of telling a story. You have to be able to present a challenge to your heroes in order to make the stakes high. And oh my God, are the stakes high in this series. They kick off the first book, Vector Prime, they kick it off by killing a prominent, beloved name character. That is the worst kept secret in Star Wars of who that is. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to ask that in the comments that nobody says it either, even though the book is like 25 years old at this point. Because I had that spoiled for me, but I know a couple of people who haven't, and they might be reading it. So there are definitely some people out there who don't know. So keep that in mind. And it's not just that person. There's huge sacrifices that happen. Our characters are all put through the ringer. You see Luke Skywalker at his absolute peak. It's amazing. I'm loving it. I love this series a great deal. It's just amazing, and you get a significant tone shift from the rest of Star Wars. It's a lot darker. It's not grimdark. I wouldn't call it hopeless, but the midpoint of this series, Star by Star, is like the Empire Strikes Back of this whole storyline. Our characters are at the lowest point we've ever seen them. They go through things that are way beyond anything the Empire ever did to them. And they're just put up against a wall. And then, obviously, eventually there's the fighting back. And you kind of find yourself thinking, like, how the heck are they going to get out of this thing? You know, it's really great narrative decisions with what exactly we're going to have our characters go through. And then, most importantly of all, you have the reins passed off gracefully from characters like Luke and Lando and Leia, and they get passed on to the Solo kids. You got Jason, you got Jaina, you got Anakin Solo, but they kind of step into their own as leaders. They're their own characters, and they go through their struggles, and they earn all that. And it's not just, here's a lightsaber, you're the best Jedi ever. It's just so wonderfully done, and the ending is just so bittersweet, and I love it. So everything after New Jedi Order, guys, I haven't actually read yet. I'm going to read it at some point. I'm just taking a little bit of a break from Star Wars so I can check some other reading items off of my list. But you've got Legacy of the Force, which is fully about the Solo children. They're full adults now, Jedi in their own right, and they're kind of the main characters at this point. And all of our other main characters who survived the Yuuzhan Vong War are still there. They're still mentorship roles, but they're not the stars of the show anymore. Following that, you have Fate of the Jedi, which is like 40 years after Endor, I think. I really have no idea what's in those. I hear that there's some heartbreak and that they're divisive. So I'm really intrigued to find out what happens when I get to that point. But I really can't give you any more information in what's in those books and that, because I haven't read them yet. So why should you read the Star Wars EU? Well, if you are somebody who is perhaps less than satisfied with some of the Star Wars property that has been put out in the last few years, or if you love it and you just want more, you can check it out. There are more stories out there. I went through all of these. It took me like a year and a half, reading them pretty steadily at pretty steady clip. It still took me a long time. A lot of these are being re-released under the Legends banner. So it's not like the old story is, after Disney bought Star Wars and reset the timeline, they're not killing and burying the old story. They're not adding to it, but it's still out there to be enjoyed. And also, if you're an audiobook person, a lot of these are being re-released as audiobooks, which is great because many of them were only available on audio as abridged versions. And I can personally test stuff like Darth Bane and the Thrawn trilogy, and I assume the rest of them. I didn't read a ton of them on audio, but they have very talented voice actors and music and sound effects, and they're actually really good quality production. So even if you're familiar with these stories, they're worth checking out. You also have additional nuance in the movies. If you I was talking about with Revenge of the Sith or Darth Plagueis, you get additional context for the film to be in. And plus, who wouldn't want to go back and spend some time with their favorite characters? These stories aren't very long. They're not super complicated. I mean, it's Star Wars, it's not Shakespeare, so it's a pretty low bar of investment to get involved in it. As for where you should start, that all kind of depends on what you're looking for. You really can't go wrong with Revenge of the Sith novelization. All you really need to have done is watch the movies. Same thing with Darth Plagueis, and same thing with the Thrawn trilogy. All you really need to do is Thrawn trilogy has at least prerequisites for it. All you really need to do is watch Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. You're good to go, and you're going to start off on a great adventure with these characters. Be with them for 30, 40 something in universe years, and it's just a great ride. And I loved getting back to these guys, hanging out with my old friends again. You know, I was a kid, and Star Wars was my thing. I'm clearly not. I'm not old enough to have seen the originals in theaters, but I was there for when the prequel trilogy was coming into theaters, and I wanted more. I loved these movies growing up, and getting to go on more adventures with old pals was just a treat. And I would love it for other people to be able to do the same. So before we go, just a quick word about canon and storyline. So a lot of Star Wars fans are very protective of their stories, and rightfully so. It's a beloved property, and I love it too. My personal view on things is you can kind of do it any way you want. A lot of the stuff in the Disney Star Wars directly contradicts the expanded universe and vice versa. I don't care about that. I kind of hold it all in my head. It absolutely contradicts each other. I take my favorite elements from each and kind of mesh it all together. It's a complete mess. It makes no sense. There's direct contradictions in it, but I love it, and that's the way I do it because that's what this is all about. It's all meant to be enjoyed. It's all about having a great time in that galaxy far, far away, and there's really no wrong way to do that. So that will do it, guys, for this episode in the library. Thank you very much for joining me. Let me know in the comments what your favorite books in the expanded universe are. I know these books are a bit on the older side, but please keep it spoiler-free. Give me a subscription if you feel like I've earned it, and we'll see you next time in the library.